So 250 years ago, right now, the revolution was well underway. The American Revolution had been started. The Continental Congress was meeting in this building, Independence Hall. And one thing I've been doing every day is just checking letters that the Founding Fathers wrote back and forth to each other. So I figured I'd check today and see if I find anything interesting and share it with you. I've got my laptop right here. So I'm gonna be looking down and checking for letters. Okay, so we're going to start with July 12th today. I'm a day late on these, but we're going to catch up today. So, okay, we've got 8 documents. Resolution on trade submitted to Congress. Abigail Adams to John Adams. Endorsement of legal opinions on land titles obtained from the Indians. Oh, we're definitely going to read that. Then we've got general orders. We've got to Washington from Nicholas Cook, to George Washington from the Massachusetts Committee of Supplies, to George Washington from Edmund Pendleton, and to George Washington from the Virginia delegates. So quite a few to get through. We'll see how many we do here. I may take a break at some point and go back home, but let's get started. Okay, let's start with general orders. For 12th of July, 1775. Pearl, Falmouth. The Adjutant General will deliver at orderly time a certain number of printed returns to the adjutant of each regiment, so that no excuse can for the future be admitted for not making regular and exact returns when demanded. As it is only filling up the blanks and the numbers proper to be placed in them, the Commander-in-Chief will not for the future admit of any palliative or making a false return, and is resolved to bring any officer of what rank soever to a court-martial who is found delinquent. When any trumpeter or flag of truce is sent from Boston, or any post occupied by the enemy, they are to be stopped. By the first sentry they are permitted to approach, who is to call for the sergeant of the guard, who will conduct them to the officer of his guard, and such trumpeter or flag of truce is not to be allowed to stir one step beyond that guard. The officer commanding the guard will send any letters or messages brought from the enemy immediately to the Commander-in-Chief and no other person. A general court-martial of the line to sit at headquarters in Cambridge tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to try Colonel Scammons of Massachusetts forces accused of, quote, backwardness in the execution of his duty in the late action upon Bunker's Hill, end quote. The adjutant of Colonel Scammons' regiment to warn of all evidences and persons concerned to attend the court. Colonel Nixon, President of the above court. Okay, let's read the footnote. Footnote number 1. James Scammons of Bidford, District of Maine, marched his regiment about noon on the day of the battle toward Lechmere's Point to prevent a British landing there. Near the point, Colonel John Whitcomb, then acting as a Massachusetts general, informed Scammons that the enemy was not threatening that place and directed him to march elsewhere. Whitcomb testified at the court-martial that he told Scammons to go to, quote, where he could do the most service, end quote. But several of Scammons' officers and men said that Whitcomb ordered Scammons to go to, quote, the hill, end quote, which most understood to be a small rise near Prospect Hill, about a mile from Bunker Hill. Scammons, being of that opinion, posted his regiment on the small hill and sent 2 sergeants to Bunker Hill to inquire if he was needed there. After a short wait at the small hill, Scammons, on his own initiative, marched his regiment to Bunker Hill, where he found matters in great confusion. Scammons's regiment never got close enough to engage the British, but most witnesses agreed that Scammons himself showed no signs of backwardness and encouraged his men to advance up the hill before finally ordering a retreat in the face of the rapidly deteriorating situation. On 17th of July, the court-martial acquitted Scammons. Scammons resigned from the army at the end of 1775. Okay, next, let's begin with endorsements of legal opinions on land titles obtained from the Indians, 12th of July. And I'm very curious about this document. Okay. The promoters of the Walpole Company in London had this is an explanation. This must be an explanation, right? Okay, yeah, the actual document is just this line here, but we'll read the explanation first. The promoters of the Walpole Company in London had decided not to wait for confirmation of their grant before putting at least part of it on the market. They had obtained 2 legal opinions that their title to that part, the lands that the Indians had ceded at Fort Stanwix to the, quote, suffering traders, end quote, was a valid one. Franklin's involvement in their marketing plan in 1775 seemed to have been minimal. Samuel Wharton had asked him to help Major Trent's lobbying among members of Congress, but the only small sign of his support that has come to light is the endorsement below. What he endorsed were the opinions which Trent had brought with him. The first was from Henry Dagg, a counsel for the member of the Walpole Company. He argued that the right to property lay with the original Indian possessors, who were free to alienate as they pleased. Their conveyance to the crown at Fort Stanwix had been for the sole use of the traders, subject only to the king's sovereignty over settlers as British subjects, and title rested with the grantees. The second opinion, by Sergeant Glynn, was to the same effect. The crown had proprietary rights in vacant and unappropriated lands, but not in those that had been ceded to the traders, whose title was good and sufficient and protected by the laws of England. This subject was, as Franklin says, one to which he had given a great deal of attention. It was also, as he does not say, one on which he held more radical views than those of the 2 lawyers. His interest in it went beyond a mere endorsement. One of his proposed articles of confederation, which he was presumably drafting at about this time, rested on the assumption that previous purchases from the Indians were valid. In 1776, he was actively concerned in Trent's effort to dispose of the land ceded to the traders. He retained his shares in the Walpole Company, and in 1780, he and Wharton petitioned Congress to complete the grant. Okay, so there's the explanation. Here's the actual note. Philadelphia, July 12, 1775. Having long since carefully studied these points, I concur fully with Councillor Dagg and Sergeant Glynn in their opinions as above delivered. B. Franklin. That's it. Okay, some footnotes. See head note above. It's called a head note. Okay, I will try to remember that when I read head notes further. I've been calling them explanations, but we'll call them head notes. Footnote number 4. Below his endorsement in another by Patrick Henry, also an ADS and dated July 29th, concurring in the opinions, quote, from principles which appear to me very clear, end quote. We assume with no proof that Trent brought with him Wharton's MS draft of view of the title to Indiana. and had the pamphlet printed as soon as he obtained the endorsements. This assumption, if true, explains where and when the first edition appeared. It bears neither place nor date. It was designed to influence Congress, we are convinced, and was therefore published in Philadelphia, probably in the late summer. The abysmal typography suggests a printer working in haste, and haste is understandable. The promoters were trying to elicit a congressional declaration that the Indians had full power to alienate their land, and by August a scheme was afoot to sell the traders tract. See below Bancroft. Okay. Footnote number 5. For DAG, see above. The legal issues involved in this application of the Pratt-York opinion are discussed in blah, blah, blah. Okay. Number 8. See the editorial note below, Jan 19, 1776. A head note on his letter to Walpole below, Jan 12, 1777, traces developments after March 1776. Okay, well, you can go look those up if you please. We'll get there eventually, but it's going to be a while. Next, let's look at this resolution on trade submitted to Congress. Yeah, okay. Sure. This is a head note, so we'll read the head note from the National Archives. News of the Second Restraining Act infuriated and alarmed Congress. On July 12, 1775, it appointed a committee, of which Franklin was a member, to formulate a program for protecting the colony's trade. 3 days later, on Franklin's motion, the non-exportation agreement was modified to permit paying to produce for imported war material. But this concession solved only one of the problems that the agreement posed. The committee addressed the other in 2 closely similar sets of resolutions reported on the 21st by Franklin and Richard Henry Lee. Both proposed opening American commerce to the world outside the empire. Franklin had long disapproved, both in practice and principle, of parliamentary constraints on American trade. He was ready for a clean sweep. The content of his proposals showed his daring, and the method of implementing them showed his moderation. The ports would not be opened if the Restraining Act was repealed at any time before July 20th, 1776. Once opened on that date, they would remain so, come what might, for 2 years at the least. Just as Franklin had acquiesced in the olive branch petition to explore the last hope of compromise, so he now offered the British government a year in which to reconsider its course. His fellow delegates, however, were not yet ready to commit themselves, even conditionally and in the future, to a declaration of commercial independence. They had lived so long within the closed system of the Navigation Acts that few could envisage dispensing with it. The resolutions were shelved, and the idea that underlay them was not adopted until almost 9 months later. At some time during those months, Franklin's resolutions were apparently reintroduced. Someone brought them up to date by adding to the AD in an unidentifiable hand. Okay, AD is autograph document. In an unidentifiable hand, an introductory clause about the abundance of grain after the harvest of 1775, and by making other minor changes. These have understandably confused modern editors about both the wording and the date of what Franklin submitted. His draft, which except for a few phrases noted below is identical with our text, permits us to delete silently the words added later, and to supply in brackets those effaced. Okay. So this is on or before July 21st, 1775. Resolved that from and after the 20th of July, 1776, being 1 full year after the day appointed by a late Act of the Parliament of Great Britain for restraining the trade of the Confederate colonies. All the custom houses therein, if the said act be not first repealed, shall be shut up, and all the officers of the same discharged from the execution of their several functions, and all the ports of the said colonies are hereby declared to be thenceforth open to the ships of every state in Europe that will admit our commerce and protect it, who may bring in and expose to sale free of all duties their respective produce and manufactures, and every kind of merchandise excepting teas and the merchandise of Great Britain, Ireland, and the British West India Islands. Resolved, that we will, to the utmost of our power, maintain and support this freedom of commerce for 2 years, certain after its commencement. Any reconciliation between us and Britain notwithstanding, and as much longer beyond that term as the late Acts of Parliament for restraining the commerce and fisheries, and altering the laws and charters of any of the colonies shall continue unrepealed. Endorsed by Charles Thompson, a proposal for opening the ports of North America, brought in by committee, read July 21st, 1775, on motion postponed for future consideration. Okay, let's read some of these footnotes. On the verso of the draft, Benjamin Franklin made unrelated jottings. First are several columns of figures, apparently British currency. Second are the sketch and Latin mottos reproduced below for reasons explained there in the editorial note on Benjamin Franklin's design for currency, February 21st. Third are notes apparently written in pencil and for the most part overwritten in ink, quote, ready to receive Irish woolens whenever they shall ascertain methods of sending them, free of all imposition, resolve not to treat separately, resolve concerning the power of Parliament to alter constitutions, Lord Chatham's resolution. The difference has been whether we shall give our money or have it taken from us by force contrary to our rights. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's read this footnote. Footnote number 4, Worthington Ford printed the text in the JCC already cited under July 21st as if the alterations were then a part of it. They appear in comparing that text with ours. Burnett and Smith assigned the draft, which we are convinced preceded the final version, to 1776 when the resolutions were reintroduced in their altered form. Okay, footnote number 6, the comma after teas, quote, teas, obscures the meaning, which is that they and British merchandise are excluded. This paragraph would have closed, along with the customs houses, the loophole in the non-exportation agreement whereby rice could be cleared for Britain to be re-exported from there. Number 7, Benjamin Franklin first wrote 1, then 3, before settling on for 2. Okay. We'll leave it there. Okay, so we're gonna leave it there for now. I'll finish the rest of these letters at home. And we're back. Let's see. I guess we finished with the resolutions on trade submitted to Congress. We did the endorsement of legal opinions on land titles obtained from the Indians, and we did general orders. So now we have the real letters here. Okay, let's just start with to George Washington from Nicholas Cook. 12th of July. Why is the camera not? I want this camera to focus properly. Is it good? Okay. From Nicholas Cook, Providence, July 12th, 1775. Sir, I beg leave to congratulate your Excellency upon your becoming appointed General of the Armies of the United Colonies, which hath given sincere pleasure to every friend of America, and will, I hope, prove glorious to yourself, and be attended with essential advantages to your country. The General Assembly of this colony have the deepest sense of the necessity of a strict union, and the most vigorous efforts of the colonies to preserve them from unlimited servitude, and their utmost exertions in the common cause may be depended upon. I also assure your Excellency that I shall give you every possible assistance in my power, and that I am with very great regards, sir, your Excellency's most obedient, humble servant, Nicholas Cook. Nicholas Cook, a merchant and distiller in Providence, was elected Deputy Governor of Rhode Island on 3rd of May, 1775, and almost immediately became acting governor when the colony's General Assembly, offended by Governor Joseph Wanton's loyalist sympathies, prohibited him from renewing his oath of office. The Assembly declared the governorship vacant in November 1775, and Cook was elected to the office in his own right. He served until May 1778. Next, let's read to Washington from the Massachusetts Committee of Supplies. Letter not found. Okay, letter not found. From the Massachusetts Committee of Supplies, 12th of July, 1775. On 12th of July, Horatio Gates wrote on behalf of George Washington to the Committee of Supplies, quote, His Excellency General Washington has commanded me to acknowledge the receipt of your letter dated this day from Watertown. When the application was made yesterday to know the quantity of tents, boards, and sails that could be procured immediately, the General wished to supply Roxbury Camp with as much as is wanted there, and sufficient to cover 1,000 men and their officers in this district. To George Washington from Edmund Pendleton. From Edmund Pendleton. Philadelphia, July 12, 1775. Dear General, my friend Mr. George Baylor will be the bearer of this, who has caught such a military ardor as to travel to the camp for instruction in that art. I beg leave to recommend him to your countenance and favor, not only on account of his worthy father, but from his opinion of his own merit. He is a lieutenant in our independent company, and has gained great applause there by his diligent attention to the duties of his office, and the bravery he has indicated. Be so obliging as to make my compliments to General Lee, General Gates, Major Mifflin, and Mr. Griffin, and entreat their countenance and assistance to him also. We are hourly in expectation of hearing from you. We yesterday voted an additional company of riflemen to go from this province to gratify one that was raised and impatient to come to you. We have also consented to employ a German hussar who is to raise his 50 men and come to the camp. We have heard you remain quiet, except from cannon shot exchanged between Roxbury and Boston. You have my most cordial wishes for success in every undertaking. You have the honor to be with so great esteem, Dr. Sir, your most humble servant. Who have the honor to be with great esteem, Dr. Sir, your most humble, obedient servant, Edmund Pendleton. Footnote number 1. George Baylor of Newmarket in Caroline County, Virginia, became an aide-de-camp to George Washington on 15th of August 1775, and despite a passing fancy for joining artillery in March 1776, he apparently continued in George Washington's military family until he was appointed colonel of the 3rd Continental Dragoons in January 1777. For George Washington's comments on Baylor's shortcomings as a penman, see George Washington to Joseph Reed. On the 28th of 1778, Baylor's dragoons were surprised by a British force at Old Tappan, New Jersey, and Baylor was bayoneted and captured. He was later exchanged, and in November 1782 he assumed command of the 1st Continental Dragoons. Baylor died in Barbados shortly after the war from complications of the wound that he received at Old Tappan. Baylor's father, Colonel John Baylor, entertained George Washington at Newmarket during the French and Indian War, and in 1756 led a body of Caroline County militiamen to join George Washington in Winchester. Footnote number 2, Congress agreed on 11th of July to accept 2 rifle companies from Lancaster County, PA, instead of 1, because it had learned that in addition to the county's authorized rifle company enlisted under Captain Matthew Smith, there were, quote, a number of men raised by Mr. James Ross, out of which a good company may be formed, end quote. We read about this on 11th of July, 1775, so go to the day before the previous video and you can read about that, or listen to me read about that. That same day, Congress directed the Pennsylvania delegates, quote, to treat with and employ 50 hussars who have been in actual service and send them forward to join the troops before Boston under General Washington, end quote. The hussar unit was never raised. On 1st of August, the Pennsylvania delegates were instructed to put an end to the scheme and to discharge any hussars who had enlisted. I wonder why. Okay, next, to George Washington from the Virginia delegates, 12th of July, 1775, Philadelphia. Recommend, quote, the bearer Mr. George Baylor, not only on account of the memory of his worthy father, with whom you was acquainted, but for his own merit. His ardor in the noble cause has drawn him to your school for instruction and employment as far as his services may be required, end quote. L.S. in Edmund Pendleton's writing, Pendleton Papers. In addition to Pendleton, the letter was signed by Patrick Henry, Henry Lee, and Benjamin Harrison. Finally, let's end with Abigail Adams to John Adams. It's a little longer, as is typical, but let's see. These are often very interesting. She was a good writer. Dearest friend. Braintree, July 12th, 1775. Abigail Adams to John Adams. Dearest friend, I have met with some abuse and very ill treatment. I want you for my protector and justifier. In this day of distress for our Boston friends, when everyone does what in them lies to serve them. Your friend George Trott and family moved up to Braintree, went in with her 2 brothers and families with her father, but they, not thinking themselves to secure as further in the country, moved away. After they were gone, Mr. Church took the house and took a number of boarders. Mr. Trott had engaged a house near his friends, but being prevented going quite so soon as he designed, and the great distress of people were in for houses, the owner had taken in a family and disappointed Mr. Trott, nor could he procure a house anywhere, for the more remote from the sea coast you go, the thicker you find the Boston people. After this disappointment, he had his goods without unloading brought back to Braintree, and he with his family were obliged to shelter themselves in your brother's house till they could seek further. You know, from the situation of my brother's family, it was impossible for them to tarry there, Mrs. Trott's circumstances requiring more rooms than one. In this extremity he applied to me to see if I would not accommodate him with the next house, every other spot in town being full. I sent for Mr. Hayden, and handsomely asked him. He said he would try, but he took no pains to procure himself a place. There were several in the other parish which were to be let, but my gentleman did not choose to go there. Mr. Trott, upon account of his business, which is in considerable demand, wanted to be here. Mr. Trott, finding there was no hopes of his going out, said he would go in with him, provided he would let him have the chamber I improved for a dairy room, and the lower room and chamber over it which Hayden has. I then sent and asked Mr. Hayden to be so kind as to remove his things into the other part of the house, and told him he might improve the kitchen and back chamber, the bedroom, and the dairy room, in which he already had a bed. Excuse me. He would not tell me whether he would or not, but said I was turning him out of door to oblige Boston folks, and he could not be stirred up. And if you was at home, you would not once ask him to go out, but was more of a gentleman. In parentheses, you must know that both his sons are in the army, but not but one day's work has been done by any of them this spring, end parentheses. I, as mildly as I could, represented the distress of Mr. Trot and the difficulties to which he had been put, that I looked upon it my duty to do all in my power to oblige him, and that he, Hayden, would be much better accommodated than hundreds who were turned out of town, and I finally said that Mr. Trot should go in. In this state, Sister Adams got to bed, and then there was not a spot in brother's house for them to lie down in. I removed my dairy things, and once more requested the old man to move into the other part of the house. But he positively tells me he will not, and all the art of man shall not stir him, even dares me to put an article out of one room into another. Says Mr. Trot shall not come in. He has got possession, and he will keep it. What not have a place to entertain his children in when they come to see him? I now write you an account of the matter, and desire you write to him, and give me orders what course I shall take. I must take Mr. Trot in with me and all his family for the present, till he can look out further and have that house. It would make your heart ache to see what difficulties and distresses the poor Boston people are driven to. Belcher has 2 families with him. There are 3 in Vesey's house, 2 in Edder's, 2 in Mr. Saville's, 2 in Jonathan Bass's, and yet that obstinate wretch will not remove his few things into the other part of that house, but live there paying no rent upon the distresses of others. It would be needless to enumerate all his impudence. Let it suffice to say, it moved me so much that I had hard work to suppress my temper. I want to know whether his things may be removed into the other part of the house, whether he consents or not. Mr. Trot would rejoice to take the whole, but would put up with anything rather than be a burden to his friends. I told the old man I believed I was doing nothing but what I should be justified in. He says, well, 'tis a time of war, get him out if I can, but cannonball shall not move him. If you think you are able to find 3 houses for 3 such tenants as you have, they must abide where they are, though I own I shall be much mortified if you do not support me. I feel too angry to make this anything further than a letter of business. I am most sincerely yours, Abigail Adams. 1. Footnote number 1. George Trot, a Boston jeweler who lived in the South End and was an active son of liberty, had in 1776 married Anne Boylston Cunningham, daughter of John Adams' uncle, James Cunningham. Number 2. His brother was evidently Peter Boylston Adams. 3. Braintree literally teemed with Haydens, young and old, and the particular Hayden and Haydens, who were at this time apparently tenants in the John Adams birthplace, cannot be identified. This, in parentheses, this entire letter and all other allusions to the dispute with old Mr. Hayden were omitted by CFA in editing the correspondence of Abigail Adams. Were omitted by Charles Francis Adams in editing the correspondence of Abigail Adams and John Adams. Footnote number 4. Abigail Adams reported the recent birth of a niece in her letter to Mercy Warren, 24th of July, below, and a daughter to Peter Boylston and Mary Crosby Adams, was baptized Susanna on 16th of July. She died in April, 1776. 5. Thus in manuscript. 6. 3 years later, Abigail Adams felt she had, quote, wrought almost a miracle, end quote, when she finally succeeded in getting Hayden, quote, out of the house, or rather hired him to remove, end quote. If you like this and you want to hear more, leave a like and a subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.